that now. And then we can continue. Okay, so where does all this phosphorus come from? As I mentioned, it comes from many different sources. And Vermont contributes a total of 631 metric tons per year. So that's this pie chart that you see on the left side of your screen. Of that 631 metric tons per year, agricultural lands contribute the most, highest percentage. On the right side of the screen, the pie chart here is the amount that we need to sort of reduce our phosphorus by about 30% in order to meet our phosphorus reduction targets and improve lake water quality. The largest and most cost-effective of those reductions are coming from the agricultural sector. So straightening rivers and armoring banks was done mistakenly in the past, sometimes even currently, but hopefully mostly in the past, to save farm fields and backyards. On the left side of your screen, sort of along this section, you can see this naturally curving section of the La Platte River in Heinsberg. You know, lots of curves, lots of oxbows, lots of little stretches in the back. And then over here on the right side of your screen, you see a straightened stretch of the same river. This is also the La Platte at the corner in Heinsberg. This is 116 and Silver Street, Charlotte Road. So when the straightening and berming was done, it led to more flooding downstream because of the water flowing faster, more sediments being carried downstream, and more damage to property because of the force of those flood waters. Of the reaches that have been assessed in the La Platte watershed, that's about 66 miles, 14 miles were mapped as straightened, and that's about 21% of the assessed sites. As I'm sure you've all been hearing about in the news, flooding is much more common now because of climate change. The vast majority of phosphorus reaches the lake during these major stormwater events. So overall, in our very large Lake Champlain drainage area, our clay soils, our past management practices, development, and heavier storms are all accelerating the rate of phosphorus and other pollution reaching the lake. Because our river systems are so connected to lake health, solutions to lake pollution must occur throughout these systems, including their upslope watersheds. In other words, us here in Heinsberg, we affect what's happening downstream in Charlotte, which all affects what's happening in the lake. So it really takes this sort of all-in watershed approach. And this watershed approach is complemented by Vermont's enhanced and science-based river management principles. So we'll now watch a brief video that shows 3 of these river management principles. Each new strategy is shown first, followed by the historic stream alteration that it replaces, and then why this replacement is important. Okay, so I'll now just do a real quick review of those 3 river management principles that you just looked at. So first, we have to allow natural floodplains to work by slowing flows and attenuating sediments. When this happens, those phosphorus-rich clay soils can settle out onto the floodplain lands, delivering nutrients to floodplain plants that enrich habitat instead of carrying them down to the lake. Stream water and sediment flows slow down when the streams meander naturally. By increasing the meanders and the stream length over the slope of its watershed, the flows are less erosive and both habitat and water quality increase naturally. And removing gravel from the stream bed causes downcutting, adds to stream speed and force, and therefore erosion and sediment loading to the lake. The overall message of this video is that what we do in one place in the watershed may have an unintended effect on the stream. So we have to consider the functioning of the whole watershed or catchment area to be effective. This is really what we mean by taking a watershed approach. Okay, so what's being done here in Vermont? Like, what are the new policies, regulations that we should be aware of? So the state of Vermont has put or will soon put new regulations into place, including the 3-acre permit, the municipal roads general permit, and required agricultural practices. Towns and property owners must meet these requirements, often at great expense. Lewis Creek Association and land trusts work to promote voluntary measures, often going above and beyond regulations to take into account climate change. For example, the Vermont Land Trust conserved the river corridor on the Clifford and Briggs farms in the Starksboro Valley on Lewis Creek. This project will allow the stream to meander and access its natural floodplain, as in the video. Monitoring water quality helps us to detect hotspots or like areas with really high levels of a certain pollutant while understanding trends in water quality. Our water quality monitoring program, the South Chittenden River Watch, informs our project locations and designs, as well as the work of state agencies. Our current data results confirm that all of the La Platte region streams have excessive phosphorus concentrations. Towns and others can better utilize this information, for example, by including info about high phosphorus in your town plan to allow the DRB authority to make conditions for water quality, such as respecting a wider buffer. Many of you have probably seen this map before. This is what we call our scorecard map for the La Platte River and direct drainage watersheds. And it's a summary of 10 years of water quality data results. It also includes information on culverts and on stream channel stability. So on this map, each of the icons with the 4 small squares, like this one here, if you can see my mouse, is one of our sampling locations. In the upper left corner of each of the boxes is sort of an indication of phosphorus levels. And it also shows solids in the upper right corner, E. coli, which is a type of bacteria, in the bottom right, and chloride on the bottom left. The colors reflect a water quality score of either poor in red, moderate in yellow, or good in green. So again, you'll notice that here in Charlotte, pretty much every station has high or poor levels of phosphorus in this upper left corner of the box. This sort of paper version, paper version of the scorecard map also shows data on stream channel stability and culverts, which are some of these sort of circular and square signs. And it also gives a list of projects suggested for your town by various reports and studies. Those projects help us work in your town to help improve water quality, give us ideas of where we should be looking for those projects. So just for your knowledge, especially as Conservation Commission, perhaps as DRB or planning commissioners, a version of the scorecard map is now available online as well. And it has a variety of sort of click on and off type layers that you can check out. it includes all of the water quality conditions that I just mentioned, so culverts and stream channel stability and water quality data, but it also includes things like land cover and other information about the watershed that may be helpful as you're, as you're looking around at those, at the water quality in your town. I'm happy to, give you a brief tour of that too. Probably not tonight, unless you're really antsy to stay on really late. But it's kind of fun if you're into mapping to just check that out. And FYI, the data on that map are still the old data from, it was like 10 years of data from 2003 to 2015. But we are planning to create a new map that will show just our water quality data for recent years of water quality sampling. Hopefully that will be available later this spring, maybe summer, and I will be sure to send that out to you guys so you can explore our more recent data as well. So you may have seen our Ahead of the Storm program signs around Charlotte, Shelburne, Heinsberg. This program really showcases principles of slowing water down, spreading it out, and sinking it into the ground. These are demonstration sites, and they essentially describe for folks driving by or interested about how we could install practices like these throughout the watershed in order to improve water quality. You've probably seen this site, East Thompson's Point Road in Charlotte. This is a roadside swale that was designed with these rock check dams to essentially slow the water down as it travels down this swale and before it drains into Thorpe Brook. Spreading it out, this is at the Heinsberg Town Garage, where buildings and a large berm were originally directly next to this brook. So there was a large berm here with buildings on top of it that had essentially been it had caused the brook to to be compressed into that small area and not be able to move around. So what we did is we were able to do some construction, move the buildings out. We have a new Heinsberg Town Garage now. Excavate some of this soil and bermed area that was here and do some replanting. So this site now, this was right after it was replanted, but it's looking really nice. The brook now, when it floods, can come out here onto the floodplain and drop its sediment load before it gets washed down into the La Platte River and onto Lake Champlain. And then sinking water into the ground. This is a site at Shelburne Community School, the middle of the school bus circle. And this used to just be a grassy lawn with storm grates where the water went directly from the parking lot into McCabe's Brook. And we were able to transform this area into a rain garden, which allows the water to sink into the ground, getting cleaned up by those plants that you see there before being sent on to the brook and the lake. Okay, so just a few ideas of what towns can do to help improve water quality if you're on a town board or commission. One thing is to enhance the language for the protection of river corridors, buffers, floodplains, and wetlands in your town plans and land use regs. We can also design for climate change, so we can go above and beyond the existing state regulations. For example, you could lower the trigger that requires review for the amount of impervious surface in a development. Heinsberg requires enhanced stormwater management practices for development of 10,000 square feet of impervious surface instead of the state's 1 acre trigger. Without enhanced land management practices, new weather patterns will damage the lake sooner. We can go above and beyond the municipal roads general permit. This roadside swale, again, part of that East Thompson's Point Road project in Charlotte, was designed to carry water from a 100-year storm in this swale. So, it will allow a lot of water to pass through there safely without erosion or without problems. And of course, we could also condition private road designs in our development. As you can see, a large portion of our towns are made up of private roads. and of course driveways as well. We need to apply those municipal roads general permit design principles to both driveways and private roads, and maybe even enhance them to prepare for those larger storms. Examples of this include crowning the road to prevent gully erosion, grass lining ditches on the sides, putting in water bars on steeper roads, and installing check dams and rock lining on the steeper road ditches to slow the flow of the water. Of course, stay up to date with water quality conditions in your town. We do have an annual report on our website, and like I mentioned, we're hoping to come up with a story map version of those data that are a little more accessible, as opposed to reading through a multiple page water quality report that can be a little bit boring at best. Start a conservation fund to protect natural areas of high public value. You guys already have this in Charlotte, so and in fact, you're my example here. This is the East Charlotte Lewis Creek property that was conserved with additional funding from the Charlotte Land Trust and LCA. We can mitigate impacts from historic building and farming too close to stream corridors and wetland areas, and from historic stream alterations that now increase flows, allowing excessive loading to the lake. And of course, there are things you can do on your own property as well. So managing your landscaping to prevent soil and stormwater from leaving your property are a big one. Apply those ahead of the storm principles of the 3 S's: slow, spread, and sink to your own property's backyards, driveways, and private roads. You want to keep the soil on your own property. That might mean redirecting downspouts from your gutters so that the water sheets over the lawn instead of making a gully. You could use a rain barrel to collect rainfall, so you can use it for watering. And of course, fix gullies when they have just begun instead of waiting for a long time. You can grade and use water bars or broad-based dips in your driveway. You can allow water to sink into the soil. This is a rain garden installed at a private home in Charlotte. It allows water from the roadside ditch that used to flood across their driveway to be collected in this area and to soak into the soil instead of flooding across their property. You can minimize the amount of lawn on your property. Cut your grass no shorter than 3 inches. All this slows the flow of the water because taller grass and plants have deeper root systems and they can catch more water. Trees and shrubs along streams and swales can help minimize pollutants and sediments that reach the stream. And of course, there are a few other things you can do as well that, that help improve water quality. So your town provides funding support each year to LCA, and we have a devoted group of volunteers who help collect water quality samples. We'd love to have you consider joining our team in one way or another. And I'll just say that, I'm happy to take any questions now, but I'm also happy to have you reach out to me after this presentation or to get involved with LCA. Funding for this presentation was provided by both Lake Champlain Basin Program and NUIPIC, but also by DEC's Tactical Basin Planning funding that serves to allow me to cruise around and visit our towns and give this presentation. So what we do on our properties and in our towns will determine our success in restoring both the health and beauty of Lake Champlain and our community health. And with that, I will stop my sharing so I can see all your lovely faces again, and happy to take any questions or comments or discussion.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. That was wonderful to hear and see. And yeah, does anyone have any questions for Kate? Oh, Mary, you're muted.
I thought it was excellent. If anything, for this old brain, it was a little rapid.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see it again, definitely, or, I took notes, but it was superb.
There's a lot of info packed into there. I tried to keep it really short because like, the audience loses interest after 15 minutes or something. That's what they say. So tried to fit it all in. But yes, I'm happy to revisit, or I will post this on our YouTube page. So if anyone is looking for it, I'll send out a link after the
Is the PowerPoint or the keynote available as a file too? Because it's just, I'd like to kind of scrutinize some of those pie charts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very,
I think there's an old version of this on our website right now. And I edited it a bit for you guys tonight, so I can send that your way.
Is that something that we could find on the website just by searching on the website, Lewis Creek Association website, Kate?
Yeah, I think so. In our library section, there's a variety of resources. So it includes the scorecard map and that online version of it. It also has links to a variety of videos and information about ahead of the storm.
I just want to speak up again and say, I especially appreciated your saying the source of the phosphorus and how the phosphorus is so dangerous in the lake. It was especially well articulated.
Good, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, Dan.
Hey, hi, everybody. Dan Albrecht from Chittenden County Regional Planning, and I help run our Clean Water Advisory Committee, of which Lewis Creek is a member, and of course the town as well. And I'll have some other things to say here towards the end, but I'm wondering in terms of Charlotte, if you could if you could choose 3 projects that you'd want to try to implement, what's sort of next on the list?
Yeah. We have a study right now looking at McCabe's Brook, which is impaired in sort of the lower part of McCabe's where it drains into the La Platte near Shelburne Bay. And I would hope that out of that sort of planning process that we will have some good projects in Charlotte to help improve water quality in the McCabe's. So that's one. It's not a specific project. That may not really be what you're looking for, but I think there are possibilities there. If you look at the map of the McCabe's, you'll see that it's fairly straightened, sort of in the headwaters, like in between Charlotte Central School and the town line. There's some sections where it was straightened, and I think there might be some nice restoration opportunities there. Mud Hollow Brook is a tributary to the La Platte, and there are some agricultural, sort of maybe historic agricultural concerns there, with Mud Hollow having really high E. coli levels. And so I think in the future, it'll be really interesting to visit that and get a little more info about like what's happening on the ground there currently. Like, are there projects that we can sort of help move along, maybe along with Winooski NRCD, or some other groups that work with farmers to improve water quality. And there's some issues in the like Kimball Thorpe Brook areas where they drain into the lake as well. I don't have any specific projects like in the back of my mind there, but obviously of concern, Kimball Brook is impaired in the like lower maybe mile or so. So I think that's of concern as well, and
Okay.
hopefully worth some work in the future.
Thanks.
I have a question, and it may be kind of naive, but kind of, how would you, what's the most comprehensive definition you could give of a catchment area?
Mm,
Is it just is it a natural kind of a floodplain that you just want to reacquaint the river with, or you, in some cases, actually engineering one that didn't
yeah,
exist?
so, right, so a catchment is sort of synonymous with like a watershed, like on a smaller scale, or like a section of a watershed. So it would be
Mhm.
like from the high points, that drain to a certain area. A catchment would be like that area that catches that water, if you will.
Mhm.
And so, it might be like a certain, when we say like a sub watershed, it would be like a smaller version, like the La Platte is the larger, or Lake Champlain is the larger watershed, or La Platte is the larger watershed, but Mud Hollow or some section of Mud Hollow Brook is the sub watershed. If that makes sense, or the catchment area.
Mhm.
But it could be a small, it could be like a half an acre that drains to your swale next to your house. That could be a catchment as well, a catchment area. That
Okay.
helps. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, more or less. I guess I was wondering, like in a case of like the McCabe's Brook study, whether they're, when they look at remediation, how much earth moving does that involve at all, if any, or is it just kind of like planting, shoring up the banks and that kind of thing?
Right. Yeah, I think it really depends on the project. I mean, in some cases, like there's enough space to essentially like let the river repair itself, that if we just leave it alone, or maybe we remove this like small section of berm next to the river, it can sort of begin its process of being able to meander again. And we can do some plantings, and that's good enough for there. There may be other areas where, I'm not the expert really. This is engineers who are designing these things who, look at it and are like, well, the best plan here is really to get in there and do some serious earth moving.
Yeah.
But I mean, the ideal really is sort of the green infrastructure of being able to use our natural systems to, allow the stream to flood out onto its floodplain where it can, and, use wetlands to help clean up the water naturally without having to do a ton of work. So really protection of those existing resources is ideal.
And given that ag land is one of the biggest contributors to phosphorus going into the lake, is there, do you have a thought about what the largest impediments toward improving that are? What are the biggest challenges to improve that condition?
I know Agency of Ag has been doing a lot of, they're like improving their required agricultural practices. That's been in the works in the last, few years. And that's a lot of good, a lot of good work and a lot of good improvements. It can be frustrating as a watershed group because we don't get communication on like their projects. It's all like very secretive as to like which, like, okay, we did this project on this farm, like, or this farm was required to do this.
Mm-hmm.
It's often not, we're not privy to that information, I guess. Unless we have been involved, like we know the farmer and they're willing to talk to us directly. The Agency of Ag will not share that information with us, which can feel like an impediment. It can feel like, hang on, like we'd like to know what's happening. Like, what are your plans for this area on this farm? Or, what, like, how can we help move this along? But I think there are a lot of good partners as well. Like we're the Winooski Natural Resources Conservation District is great. They work with farmers sort of voluntarily, like to suggest improvements on their property. And I hope that we'll be able to collaborate more closely with them to be involved and maybe visit some farms as well.
Anybody else raising their hand? I had another question about if you could just briefly detail how you mentioned in the Starksboro, which is kind of success story, how that came about to improve the mitigation on the banks there of the Lewis Creek.
Yeah, that was a little bit before my time at LCA, so I don't know all the history there, but
Yeah.
my understanding is it was a conservation easement. So area that had been farmed with cows, up close to the stream was conserved, well, transferred ownership and was conserved. And then there were some plantings done along the stream where the cows had previously, I don't know if they quite had access to the stream, but it was pretty eroded and in pretty poor condition. And that's now a hop farm, I believe, in portions of that area in Starksboro. So no more cows there, but still doing some agricultural stuff.
Wow, that's great. Anybody else have any questions for Kate? We're not, while she's here. Oh, Susan, raising your hand.
Yeah, this is something I've been curious about, and it seems maybe minor, but maybe it's not. I think you mentioned like pet waste.
Mm-hmm.
And I have one dog now. I pick it up sometimes I don't. I just don't. And part of me wonders like, okay, well, if I don't pick it up, does it just kind of go into the ground and get cleaned naturally, or is it really a big issue? And I'm just curious of your thoughts on that.
It's a really good question. I mean, honestly, I don't have a great answer for you, like,
Yeah.
because I mean, it certainly could be an issue. Like you could see where, if you had a lot of dogs or a lot of pet waste that was, close to a waterway or, even close to like the ditch or in the ditch and, it suddenly rains, like all that is gonna, bacteria or whatever phosphorus that is in the waste is gonna get washed down. But I could also see the other side of it, like, oh, if it's in the woods nowhere near
Right.
waterway, or like there's something else in the way that's going to slow that water down before it reaches the stream or whatever. So I guess I don't have a good answer is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, that's okay.
I mean,
I didn't know. Yeah.
I think it's great to pick it up and dispose of it properly. My understanding is the best way is in your toilet. That's what I hear anyway,
Oh,
as opposed to trashing it or whatever. But
thank you.
yep, that's all I know.
Mary?
I would just add to that it could be that there are viruses or bacteria in a feces that could be toxic to wild animals. That's one thing I've heard.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that there could be things in there that you don't want to spread around.
And I know also, getting back to cows and farmland and all, that, cows are unknown, don't let them go into water that would then flow into the lake. I mean, just because they're going to stir it all up, but also feces and urine,
Yeah.
whatever they might drop.
Yep.
And I know that they're planting larger margins of grass between, say, a mowed field, not a mowed field, a plowed field and a river, compared to what they used to allow. A farmer wants to plow right up to the edge of the water so he can make the most use. And they're not supposed to do that anymore.
Right.
That's all I
Yeah,
got.
I don't remember what the exact numbers are. I think it's maybe just a 10-foot buffer that's required. I don't remember exactly, but
I don't either.
It's
I
not a
would-
lot. We'll put it at that. It's not a lot, but maybe better than it used to be. I was just hearing a presentation today on wood turtles and how they're, they use our like sort of medium streams, and they range from the stream where they overwinter up into the, floodplains and ag fields and across roads and whatever, up to 1,000 feet before they, eventually return back to the streams for the winter. And really our stream buffer, regulations, or even like our best management practices say of like saying we're going to have a 50-foot or 100-foot buffer are totally inadequate for that species, that they're just going to get hammered by whatever it is, the road or the ag equipment that runs them over, or
Yep.
whatever. So side note, in my other job, put my turtle hat on.
Did I hear that you say that water monitoring is a thing that you're always looking for volunteers for, or does that
We
require
are.
any specialized preparation?
Yeah, it requires
Thing.
nothing special other than attending our training in the spring. And, we will have a variety of sites. I'm not sure exactly which sites those will be yet, because we haven't heard back from the state on what they're approving for this year. But we have sites throughout Shelburne, Charlotte, Heinsberg, Starksboro. I don't think we have any in Moncton this year. And we have maybe one in Ferrisburg. So yeah, we'd love to have you, even if you just want to get on my list, I'll, add you to my email list, and then I'll send out notifications as we're getting ready for the season. Essentially, you would go out, it's 10 times a year, 8 times on like a bi-weekly basis, so every other Monday or whatever it is. And then 2 times like on a sort of on-call basis, where we try to target a high rainfall event. So if it's raining, or I know it's going to rain all night long, call you up or email you or whatever and say, okay, we're all going out in the morning, can you make it? You would be with a partner or two, and essentially you'd be assigned 1 or 2 sites. You'd go out with your little bottles, take a sample out of the stream and drop it off before 9 a.m. either in Shelburne or in Heinsberg. And then I take those samples to I don't take them, but I do things with them, and then I bring them to someone who takes them to Randolph, which is where the state agricultural and environmental lab is. And they analyze those samples for phosphorus and nitrogen and chloride. So it's kind of it's a fun way to get out, and it doesn't require a whole lot of time commitment. Like I said, 10 times a year, and probably 2 or 3 hours each time, depending on where you live and where your site is.
Are they also testing for E. coli?
So they're not. They used to be a little bit different, where we could propose certain things. Like we could say, oh, we want to do E. coli this year on these sites, and they would say yes or no. They're now sort of ordaining what we will do. We can propose sites, but they tell us which components they'll pay for. And in this case, it's phosphorus, nitrogen, and chloride. And I think part of that is because E. coli is you have to turn it around really quick. It's got like a 24-hour time from when you sample it to when they have to analyze it. So it's much harder for, like I would have to go drive samples over to Randolph, and they would have to be, Johnny on the spot, take that sample and analyze it in 24 hours. So I think that's probably the main reason there. I think in the future, hopefully there will be more E. coli sampling. The state, my understanding is the state's working on sort of their policies regarding how they'll allow or pay for those samples, or if they, what they want to know from us about E. coli.
Does nitrogen and chloride tell them something more than phosphorus? Or what is that?
Yeah, so Nitrogen is another nutrient that feeds like plant growth, so algae growth and that type of thing. Nitrogen comes more from like agricultural or wastewater type systems. So that's, sort of in conjunction with the phosphorus, it's good for them to know what those values are. In general, we don't ever have really high nitrogen levels at our sites. Like they're not near, any sort of limit, if you will. The chloride levels are related to just sort of aquatic life. So it's from salt applied to roads usually. And that salt gets washed down into our waterways and can affect aquatic, organisms. And I think in some areas there's concern that, those chlorides are affecting organisms enough that they need to make some changes to road management practices.
Right.
And that chloride has not always been, at least in this area, has not historically been sampled strongly. So it's good information to have about like where those high chloride values are.
Mhm. Great. Well, I can email you, but if you just take one email address, it's conservationcharlotte@gmail. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I have to check.
Conservation in Charlotte at
It's
Gmail.
Conservation Charlotte.
Conservation Charlotte.
With
Okay.
no in, at Gmail, and then that gets forwarded to all our members. So
Oh,
you don't have
perfect.
to remember any people.
Okay, great. That
that'll
sounds
work.
good. I will send you guys the recording and the slide deck here, so you can
Yeah.
check that out.
And I'll just make sure it gets forwarded, but it should. Wow, that was wonderful. Does anybody have any other questions for Kate before she signs off? I know there's also other things to volunteer for Lewis Creek Association, like the frog bit and, getting out in a kayak, which sounds like a lot of fun. That probably some members would be interested in doing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some fun stuff, and we'll be doing a tree planting project this spring down in Ferrisburg. If anyone's interested in planting some shrubs or trees,
Yeah.
so we can keep
Definitely.
you posted. If you're not on our email list, let me know. I can put you on there, or you can sign up on our website and
Okay,
get our newsletters once a month. Keep up to date.
absolutely. Sounds good. Did you have something you wanted to add, Dan? That you said.
Yeah, just a couple of things to highlight. So the role of the town of Charlotte and water quality is an important one. One of the most all towns, you've probably heard for many years about our urban and stormwater, or urban and suburban towns in Chittenden County doing a lot of work on stormwater and dog poop and washing your car and phosphorus loading, and that's always in the news about these large expenditures to restore the impaired streams. But all of the rural towns in Chittenden County, as well as statewide, have for the last few years have been heavily involved in something called the Municipal Roads General Permit. And Charlotte, as well as other towns, have had to, they've always, taken care of roads and paid attention to ditches and culverts, primarily from a maintenance standpoint, and storm damage repair and things like that. But now, because of the Municipal Roads General Permit, there's a more systematic effort of inventorying the roads in Charlotte, making sure the ditches are adequate, making sure they have a good crown, making sure there's no erosion happening within the roadbed itself, that the culverts have proper outfalls, things like that. And so we've been helping the town. We did an inventory a couple of years ago, and we work every year with Dean Block and Junior on helping them get grants, helping to document work that's being done, and updating a database. So if you go to our website under, I think it's in the About Us section, you'll find data, and you'll look up road erosion inventory data, or ask Dean how to access that. The other thing that Kate mentioned, some of the town of Charlotte has pretty robust setbacks already from streams, but if it wanted to further expand the protections. It could look into adopting what's called river corridors, which is sort of the latest version of what used to be called fluvial erosion hazard areas. The town's fortunate that it doesn't have the super steep roads like Huntington and Bolton and Jericho, but there are still areas that do get damaged, and the town can get even more match funds from the state in the event of a FEMA declaration. So that's a benefit. And the last thing, and this is a little trickier issue, is the issue of private roads and runoff from private roads is a very tricky one, because there are standards, but they're kind of what's the word? I won't say it's an 800-pound gorilla, but it's a 200-pound gorilla of runoff from people's driveways, or when you have the private road that serves 3 or 4 homes or 5 homes or whatever. That interface of those private roads and driveways into the municipal right-of-way, that water goes straight in, and it's a long-standing issue. And so I think that's something the town should continue to try to work on to be sure not only that there's good sight distances for where the road's going to be located. That's been what's called the curb cut policy. That's been around for a long time, mostly from a safety standpoint and visibility. There really needs to be a closer look at that there's adequate maintenance on these private roads, that they do the good ditches, they have turnouts so that the water goes down the ditch and then turns out, into just a field or not in somebody's home area or whatever, their lawn, but turns out into the woods. So the water doesn't just go whooshing down the driveways and whooshing down the private roads and, oh, it's the town's responsibility now, you deal with that water and sediment. So it's a tricky one. There is a good, I think the Vermont League of Cities and Towns have tried to come up with some model language on it, but anyway, it's something to think about or talk to Dean Block about and say, hey, can we do something about this? So.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like as the planning commission takes on, like, looking at the regulations and revising them, that would be where the rubber hits the road. And
Yeah.
Our advocating for something like that, we would just need to be able to rely on a lot of evidence, to get them to actually. But once it's in the regs, then it's great, because the DRB has to follow them.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and if there's some guidance in the zoning bylaws that says, general language about, in a private development, to the extent feasible, given landscape constraints, stormwater shall not be unduly discharged into the municipal right of way. That can give some language for the DRB to say, hey, can you put a turnout there and things like that. So.
Right.
It's a tricky one, and there was, this is a problem throughout rural Vermont, because many towns, and Charlotte's no stranger to this, doesn't have a big municipal budget. So it's like, okay, do the private road because the town doesn't have the money to take care of it.
Right.
But those, which can save you money in the short term, but ultimately now that the town really has to watch out, and you don't want your local streams to become fully impaired and get designated like the 3 or 4 streams in South Burlington and the 2 or 3 in Burlington and Williston and so on and so forth, because then you don't want to become an MS4 permittee.
What is that called?
It's a thing called a municipal separate storm sewer system permit, and all. And so it's, it even affects, like parts of Milton and Colchester that don't have, sewer and things like that. But you don't want an impaired stream, because then you're going to have a plan to reduce the phosphorus runoff, and we're talking in the millions of dollars. So even Little Monroe Brook in Shelburne, it's a couple $1 million of retrofits. Not so much to town roads, but lots of ponds, things like that, which impacts the homeowners associations, things like that. So,
well, that's an incentive.
yeah. So, and then there's the added benefit of having, if you have good road policies and good ditch policies and private roads, you're not going to get your town roads blown out by too much water too fast. Because that's what happened. If you're in your steeper parts of town, those are the roads that get challenged the most. Too much water too fast in the municipal right of way, and it eats away at the roadbed, and it blows out the ditches and the culverts. So you guys are lucky because you're relatively flat town.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we have a lot of soggy ground.
Right. And you get the wrong time, but you get the wrong conditions with a really wet spring or a heavy snowpack, and then a wet spring, and then you get a big storm in the summer, and yeah, you're gonna have saturated soils, and the water's
Yep.
gonna have nowhere to go, and it's gonna eat out your roads and
Yep.
stuff.
Thanks for that. That was very illuminating for me. Does anybody else have any other questions? I think we're getting to be 9 o'clock, so we're probably gonna all sign off. But thanks again for your presentation, Kate. That was really
Yeah.
wonderful.
Thank you for
And,
having me. Happy to come back anytime.
Okay, next time. But no, there's lots of things you could tell us about. So for sure, if you have ideas that percolate up that you think would be relevant for us to connect on, or even between the conservation commissions.
Yeah.
And you're in your role there, that would be great.
Great. Okay, sounds good.
Anybody else? I think we're all going to sign out then at this point. And I'll see you guys next time, and we'll follow up by email on some of the things we talked about.
Okay, thanks so much, everyone. Nice to see you all.
Take care. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.